Lesson 34, Section 1. In this presentation, we'll be introducing the passive voice, looking at the forms of the perfect passive, and talking about agents of passive verbs. So far, all of the verbs we have seen have been in the active voice. Here, in the active voice, a verb's subject is acting upon someone or something. The subject is the actor, the agent. For instance, the Athenians have stopped the war. The verb here is have stopped. The subject of that verb is the Athenians, and they're the ones performing the action, really. The war, the object of this stopping, is having that action performed upon it. The same action, however, could be described in the passive voice by switching subject and object. The war has been stopped by the Athenians. So here, the war is in fact the subject of the verb, but not really the agent or the actor of the action. This is what is known as the passive voice. In the passive voice, then, the verb's subject is being acted upon. So the action being described and who's really doing it and who is really having something done to it has not changed. We've just changed the voice in which we describe it. In English and Greek, the passive voice can be used with any tense. For instance, the war was stopped. In Greek, this would be the aorist, or this is how we might translate into English, the Greek aorist. The war was being stopped, in perfect tense. The war is, or is being stopped, the present tense. The war has been stopped, perfect. The war will be stopped, future. Later on, we'll see the future perfect, too. It's the one tense we haven't really covered. Well, we haven't covered the past perfect either, but we don't have to worry about those right now. Right now, all we have to worry about is the perfect passive. The war has been stopped. We begin with the perfect passive. As with the perfect active, here we make use of the perfect stem, but without kappa. In this case, pepau. We have the reduplication of that initial consonant, pi, but we don't add the kappa as we did in the active, the perfect active. So let's look at these forms. We're going to start with the verb pauo and the perfect stem minus the kappa. And we're going to add in the singular these endings which we've not seen before. Pepau mai, pepau sai, pepau tai. Obviously the I ending is common to all of those. In the plural, we see pepau meta, pepau ste, and pepau tai. In the infinitive, we see pepaus tai. We do see this diphthong I quite a bit in the perfect passive, as you can see. The participle, we're going to see pepau menos, pepau menos. So these are the forms of the perfect passive indicative, infinitive, and participle. Now again, what do these mean? I have been stopped. This is perfect passive, not I have stopped, which would be perfect active, but I have been stopped. You have been stopped. He, she, or it has been stopped, etc. Now, to look at some of the other moods, we're not going to talk about the imperative today, but we will talk about the subjunctive and the optative. We're going to start with our participle form, pepau menos. And in fact, what we see here for the perfect passive subjunctive and optative, which aren't used all that frequently, is what is called a periphrastic form. In English, we often have compound tenses, where we have, for instance, I have been stopped. We've got three different words there, really. Have, been, and stopped. It's a compound tense. It's a periphrastic tense, where we're kind of literally speaking around something. In Greek, we see this occasionally, too. We're going to start with the participle form, and we're going to add, in order to get the subjunctive and the optative of the perfect passive, well, the forms of the subjunctive. So pepau menos o would be let's take one of the uses of the subjunctive. Let's say let me If we wanted to say something like, let me be stopped, or rather, let me have been stopped, which doesn't make any sense in English, we might say, pepaumenos o. Again, these subjunctive and optative forms have very contextually based meanings. But this is how we'd form it. We'd take that perfect passive participle, pepaumenos, we would, of course, decline it, as we would with any participle. And we would add the forms of the subjunctive of, this is eimi, if you didn't recognize those. In the subjunctive and in the optative, we would add the optative of, again, eimi, which are these forms. These are called the periphrastic forms. They're not very common. We will, however, see some in the readings. So, perfect passive, subjunctive, and optative. Now, agents of passive verbs. The agent of a passive verb is what would be the subject in an active construction. So for instance, this is the passive version of the sentence we started with. The war has been stopped by the Athenians. Here the agent, and we can see this if we translate this back to an active construction, the agent is really the Athenians. The Athenians have stopped the war. They're the ones who have done the stopping. So we would call this the agent. And this reflects that right there. The war has been stopped by the Athenians. In English, we usually identify the agent with the preposition by. In Greek, since we don't have the preposition by, obviously, the agent is usually identified with the preposition pa plus the genitive. For instance, hapalemos pepautai hepaton athenaion. This is a literal translation of the sentence we've got up above. Hapalemos, the war, pepautai, has been stopped, hepa, by, ton athenaion. They're the Athenians, masculine, plural, genitive. When the verb is in the perfect tense, or the agent is impersonal, it may also, that is the agent, be in the dative case. So rather than hepa plus genitive, we might see just the dative in certain cases. Because we are dealing with a passive verb in the perfect tense, the perfect passive, we could use the dative here. We wouldn't use it because the agent is impersonal, because the agent is personal. In this case, it's people, the Athenians. But we might see something like this. Hapalemos pepautai tos athenaios. Same translation. The war has been stopped by the Athenians. For the forms of the perfect passive, you want to take a look at page 65 in your grammar. And for further reading on forming the perfect passive, you can take a look at page 68. Thank you very much.